Agatha Raisin and the Pumpkin Patch Murder. Dear listeners, welcome to tonight's mystery. I'm Jane, your host, and I'm thrilled to have you here for another captivating tale. Before we dive in, I'd love to get to know you a little better. What's one hobby or passion that brings you joy? Are you into baking, painting, gardening, or perhaps something completely unexpected? Drop your answer in the comments. I always enjoy learning more about our wonderful community. And do not forget to like and subscribe. It will motivate me for more mysteries every day. Now, let's get cozy and begin tonight's story. Chapter 1. The Autumn Invitation. The morning sun filtered through the amber leaves of Carsley Village, casting warm, dappled patterns across the cobbled streets. Agatha Raisin, perched in her usual spot by the kitchen window, sipped her tea with deliberate slowness, letting the calm of early autumn settle around her. Steam curled in delicate spirals from the cup, mingling with the faint scent of cinnamon from the scones she had baked the day before. It was the kind of morning that whispered promises of quiet delight. The crunch of fallen leaves underfoot, the distant cawing of crows, and the occasional clatter of a bicycle bell as a villager passed by. Agatha inhaled deeply, savoring the peace, until a sharp rap at the door startled her, making her nearly spill her tea. Opening the door, she found a single envelope lying on the doormat, its edges ornate with gold filigree that caught the sunlight like tiny sparks. There was no return address, only a neat postmark stamped from the local pumpkin patch farm. Agatha's eyes sparkled with immediate curiosity. Carefully, she lifted the envelope, noting the weight of the paper and the faint, sweet smell of pumpkin spice that clung to it. "Oh, this is interesting," she murmured to herself, turning it over in her hands. The envelope seemed to hum with a silent promise, as though it contained not just paper, but a secret waiting to be unraveled. With a practiced flick of her wrist, she slid it open, revealing a cream-colored card with elegant, looping handwriting. The words leapt out at her. "You are cordially invited to the Carsley Harvest Festival. A once-in-a-lifetime surprise awaits those with keen eyes and curious hearts." Agatha set the card down on the table and circled it like a hawk. Her mind, ever fertile with speculation, immediately began weaving possibilities. A once-in-a-lifetime surprise? Was it a rare prize for the pumpkin competition? A secret recipe passed down for generations? Or perhaps something far more mysterious? Her pulse quickened with the thrill of imagined adventure, tinged with just a hint of apprehension. As she lingered by the window, she could see the pumpkin patch from her vantage point. The orange globes nestled in their rows like sentinels awaiting the festival. Something about the scene felt slightly unusual today. The shadows fell oddly across the largest pumpkin, and a faint trail of disturbed earth led towards the barn. Agatha's imagination sharpened. Who might have been out there this morning, and why had no one mentioned it? A tiny shiver of anticipation ran down her spine. She poured herself another cup of tea, trying to calm the quickening beat of her heart, but curiosity refused to be soothed. Picking up the card again, she traced the swirls of the handwriting with a delicate fingertip, noting a small smudge in the lower corner, almost imperceptible, yet somehow significant. Her eyes darted back to the pumpkin patch, scanning the edges of the field for movement, for a hint that someone or something was watching. The sense of being observed was faint, but undeniable, like a whisper brushing against her awareness. Agatha sighed, a soft smile tugging at her lips. Life in Carsley might often appear tranquil, but moments like this reminded her of the excitement that lingered just beneath the village's quiet surface. She arranged the card neatly beside her plate of scones, inhaled the warm, spicy aroma once more, and allowed herself a final indulgent moment of speculation. Autumn had never smelled sweeter, nor held such promise. With a twinkle in her eye, Agatha resolved to accept the invitation, already imagining the curious characters, playful intrigues, and gentle surprises that awaited her at the festival. The envelope sat there quietly, almost expectant, as if it knew that Agatha's adventure was only just beginning. Agatha stood before her wardrobe, deliberating with the seriousness of a general planning a campaign. Autumn and Carsley called her layers, but she wanted something that would combine comfort with a touch of flair. After all, one never knew what surprises a harvest festival might hold. She settled on a deep auburn cardigan that brought out the color of her eyes, paired with a tweed skirt and well-worn boots, perfect for traipsing through pumpkin patches without sinking into the damp earth. She added a small, quirky brooch, shaped like a carved pumpkin for emphasis, tapping it lightly with a finger as though it were a talisman. While selecting accessories, her mind wandered to the festival. Surely it would be more than just pies, pumpkins, and polite chatter. She envisioned a hidden clue tucked behind a hay bale, or a secret recipe whispered in hushed tones. After all, mysteries had a way of sneaking into even the most cheerful of villages. Smiling at her own imaginative flair, she imagined herself stepping confidently into the festival, notebook in hand, ready to document the first curious incident that presented itself. Outside, the village hummed with understated activity. Agatha's attention was drawn to Mrs. Tibbins, who scuttled past her cottage with a basket of apples, laughing in a manner that was far too high-pitched for comfort. Agatha raised a brow. Nervous laughter, or a new approach to comedy? The woman's eyes darted around as if expecting someone to appear from the shadows, which, in Agatha's experience, often meant exactly that. Further down the lane, she glimpsed a new figure, a young farmhand, silent and reserved, lingering near the pumpkin patch's edge. He adjusted his cap nervously as he watched the villagers moving about, his stance oddly rigid, like a scarecrow come to life. Agatha's curiosity piqued. Who was he, and why did he seem so out of place? She filed the observation neatly in the mental notebook she had begun keeping long before the festival even started. Crossing the garden to gather her coat, she noticed small peculiarities. The gate latch, which she was certain she had fastened securely the night before, dangled slightly askew. Scattered pumpkin seeds lay along the path, glinting in the morning sun, as though someone had walked through in a hurry. The subtle details made her pulse quicken, not alarmingly, but in a manner that sharpened her senses. Something was amiss, and the village's apparent calm only made the oddities more intriguing. By the time she stepped out of her door, fully dressed and ready for adventure, the scent of baking pies from the nearby bakery mingled with the crisp autumn air. She inhaled, savoring the moment. She walked toward the village square, letting her eyes rove over familiar sights. The market stalls being readied, the smell of hay and cider, and the occasional flutter of orange leaves drifting lazily to the ground. All perfectly ordinary, yet slightly tinged with the sense that the festival held secrets just waiting to be discovered. As she passed Mrs. Tibbins once more, her laughter erupted suddenly, a little too shrill, and the farmhand shifted his weight from one foot to another, casting a brief glance in her direction before looking away. Agatha smiled to herself, delighting in the puzzle. Every small irregularity, the broken latch, the scattered pumpkin seeds, the peculiar behavior of the villagers, added a brushstroke to a picture she could not yet fully see, and the thrill of anticipation made her steps lighter. She adjusted her scarf, glanced once more at the distant pumpkin patch, and whispered under her breath, "Let the mysteries come, then. I'm ready." And with that, she stepped into the crisp autumn morning, her mind alert, her senses tingling, and her curiosity fully awakened. Chapter 2. The Festival Begins. The crisp autumn air greeted Agatha as she stepped through the entrance of the pumpkin patch, the scent of dry leaves and freshly turned soil mingling with the sweeter aroma of apple tarts and spiced cider wafting from nearby stalls.
A gentle breeze tugged at her scarf, sending a cascade of golden leaves swirling across the path. The village was alive with murmurs and laughter, the chatter of neighbors catching up and exchanging opinions on the festival's expected delights. Children darted between the giant pumpkins, their cheeks flushed from excitement, and dogs trotted happily alongside, occasionally pausing to sniff the earthy scent of the fields. Agatha's eyes immediately fell on the enormous pumpkins lined up in neat rows, their glossy surfaces reflecting the autumn sunlight. Each seemed to possess its own character, some rounded and plump, others misshapen but oddly endearing, yet her gaze was drawn to one pumpkin that sat slightly apart from the rest. Its surface was oddly pristine, almost unnaturally polished, and it radiated a quiet presence, as if it knew it was being observed. Agatha arched her eyebrow. "Someone is taking this a bit seriously," she murmured, half to herself, half to the world. She wandered among the displays, listening with an ear for conversation. Mrs. Tibbins, still breathless from her morning antics, whispered sharply to the baker about a rumored trick pumpkin that would supposedly double in size overnight. A murmur of laughter followed, but Agatha noted the tension beneath the surface, a subtle hint of rivalry and jealousy twisting through the exchange. Nearby, two elderly farmers argued over whose pumpkin patch had produced the largest fruit last year, their faces red with both exertion and lingering pride. Her attention flicked to a scarecrow stationed near the unclaimed pumpkin. Something seemed off. Its straw-stuffed arm pointed slightly to the left, an imperfection in an otherwise carefully arranged display. Agatha crouched slightly, inspecting it from the side, and noted a faint smear on its sleeve, barely noticeable unless one looked closely. Curious, she straightened, letting her gaze wander back to the visitors milling about the patch. A young man in a flat cap lingered too long near the polished pumpkin, his posture stiff and self-conscious. Agatha's mind ticked. Observation is everything, she reminded herself, smiling inwardly at her own theatrics. She meandered along the winding paths, catching snippets of gossip that floated through the air like autumn leaves. "I heard Mrs. Pendleton's pie didn't rise this year," whispered one voice. "They say it's sabotage," added another, barely above a murmur. Agatha couldn't help but note the subtle glances exchanged among the villagers, jealousy masked by politeness, hints of long-standing grudges hidden beneath smiles. Each fragment of information was a puzzle piece, and her mind began assembling them in a way only she could appreciate. Stepping back to admire the entire scene, Agatha allowed herself a moment of pure satisfaction. The festival was a tapestry of color, movement, and anticipation, yet she sensed the undercurrents beneath the surface, the small frictions, the unspoken rivalries, the careful calculations of those who wished to impress or deceive. It was delightful and disconcerting all at once. With a small chuckle, she adjusted her scarf and scribbled a mental note to observe the polished pumpkin more closely. The day had only just begun, and already the festival promised intrigue, subtle rivalries, and tiny mysteries tucked beneath the bright autumn sunlight. Agatha's heart swelled with both amusement and curiosity. She was exactly where she wanted to be.
The lively chatter of the festival reached a sudden, piercing crescendo when a high-pitched scream cut through the autumn air. Agatha, mid-step toward the polished pumpkin she had been observing, froze, her senses immediately alert. Heads turned, forks paused in mid-air, and the jovial buzz of the morning evaporated as if swallowed by the crisp sky itself. Without hesitation, Agatha followed the sound, weaving through startled villages whose expressions ranged from disbelief to horror. She arrived just in time to see a small crowd encircle the unclaimed pumpkin, and there, sprawled awkwardly on the ground, lay the young farmhand she had noticed earlier.
His eyes were closed, his posture unnervingly still. Agatha's pulse quickened, not with panic, but with that familiar spark that always ignited when a puzzle presented itself. Villagers murmured, half in shock, half in speculation. "He must have tripped over the pumpkin," someone suggested, while another insisted, "I swear I saw him arguing with Mrs. Pendleton earlier." Agatha knelt beside him carefully, avoiding the scattering of leaves that brushed her boots. Her sharp eyes immediately took in details others overlooked. The ground was soft from last night's dew, yet a set of muddy footprints led away from the unclaimed pumpkin, veering toward the barn. She noted the stem of the pumpkin nearest him was smudged with soil, as though it had been hastily handled or possibly used as leverage. A small piece of torn fabric, faintly embroidered, lay near his hand, fluttering slightly in the breeze. Suppressing a sigh, she straightened and allowed her gaze to roam over the faces of the gathered villagers. Shock mingled with curiosity in every pair of eyes, though a few masked their expressions with a veneer of casual interest. Agatha could feel the weight of observation pressing upon her. Someone might be watching her as closely as she watched them. With a faint, wry smile, she thought, "This is exactly the kind of day I live for." While others fussed and whispered, Agatha began asking questions, her tone lightly conversational to avoid alarming anyone further. "Who found him?" she asked, tilting her head, eyes sharp. "Was he alone before this happened?" Her words were calm, deliberate, but carried an edge of authority that subtly commanded attention. Answers came in overlapping fragments. A few villagers saw him near the barn earlier, others swore he was checking on a particularly heavy pumpkin, and one small child added, "I think he was looking for something shiny." Her mind catalogued every inconsistency with ease. Footprints didn't match the farmhand's boots. The smudge on the pumpkin stem was too precise for a simple accident, and the torn fabric, it seemed familiar though she could not yet place it. Agatha's eyes swept the crowd again, noting who seemed genuinely startled and who looked almost relieved. The interplay of human expression fascinated her. Even in shock, people betrayed themselves in tiny gestures, a twitch of the lip, a tightening of the hands, a glance too quick to be casual. By now, a cluster of villagers had started debating loudly about what could have caused the accident, their voices rising and overlapping. Agatha smiled inwardly at the chaos, amused despite the grim scene. Calmly observed, and all will be revealed in time. Kneeling briefly, she picked up the torn fabric carefully, allowing it to slip between her fingers like a clue, refusing to be ignored. The festival atmosphere, once bright and playful, now felt tinged with tension and suspicion. Yet Carsley retained its charm even in this moment of crisis. The colorful pumpkins, the flattering banners, the crisp autumn light, and the murmur of concerned voices created a backdrop that was both cozy and unnervingly strange. Agatha straightened fully, her mind alive with possibilities. Someone or something had turned this idyllic day into a mystery, and she intended to uncover the truth.
Chapter 3. Clues and Confusions. The air had cooled noticeably as Agatha returned to the pumpkin patch, the sunlight softening into a mellow glow that highlighted the earthy colors of the autumn afternoon. The farmhand had been taken away discreetly by the local doctor, leaving a quiet tension that wrapped the festival in an unusual stillness. Agatha, however, felt the familiar spark of anticipation. Kneeling near the unclaimed pumpkin, she examined the ground with meticulous care. The muddy footprints she had noted earlier led not just away from the pumpkin, but veered toward the back entrance of the barn, suggesting movement that others had overlooked. Her eyes roamed over the surrounding pumpkins. One vine in particular seemed stretched at an odd angle, as though someone had leaned heavily against it or dragged something across it. She crouched to inspect further, noting faint scratches on the soil and a small splatter of dark orange sap on the leaves. Agatha tapped her chin thoughtfully. Intentional or careless," she murmured, half to herself, half in playful dialogue with the invisible audience of her own thoughts. She rose and made her way toward the small gathering of villagers who hovered nervously near the edge of the patch. Each person seemed to have a story to tell, yet their words tangled into contradictions almost immediately. Mrs. Tibbins, still fidgeting with her basket, insisted she had been near the cider stall all morning, yet Agatha had seen her dart past the barn earlier. The baker, a stout man with flowers still clinging to his sleeves, swore he was tending to the pies and had no idea what had occurred, but his eyes betrayed a flicker of nervous amusement. Agatha noted it, filing it carefully in her mental ledger. A few children lingered, whispering amongst themselves, and Agatha crouched briefly to engage them. "Did anyone see anything unusual?" she asked gently. One child shook his head, then hesitated. "I think I saw someone carrying a key," he said in a whisper, eyes wide. Agatha's interest piqued. The farm office key, she realized, had indeed gone missing. Could this be related, or merely a coincidence? She smiled inwardly. Puzzles often had layers, and she intended to uncover each one. Moving deliberately, she returned to the barn area and examined the doorway. The latch appeared intact, but a faint smear of dirt suggested it had been handled recently. Agatha's eyes twitched as she noticed a small scrap of cloth snagged on a nail. Another clue, another thread to follow. She imagined the scene unfolding, hurried steps, perhaps, a struggle, or merely someone carelessly maneuvering through the festival chaos. Every possibility, no matter how trivial, deserved consideration. As she questioned the villagers further, subtle comedic moments punctuated the tension. Mr. Coma, the local accountant, became flustered when asked about his whereabouts, his bowler hat tipping dangerously to one side. Mrs. Pendleton insisted she had done nothing wrong while simultaneously spilling cider on her apron. Agatha stifled a chuckle, mentally noting how human quirks often disguised motives and muddled the truth. By mid-afternoon, she had begun threading the puzzle together. The footprints, the skewed pumpkin vine, the missing key, and the torn cloth all hinted at a deliberate act rather than an accident. Yet the challenge remained, separating coincidence from intent, truth from embellishment, and subtle clues from distractions. Agatha's mind buzzed with possibilities, the thrill of deduction sharpening her senses without breaking the village's cozy veneer. She finally stepped back, surveying the scene as the sun dipped lower, casting long shadows across the patch. The festival continued around her, unaware of the intricate dance of observation, speculation, and subtle suspicion unfolding at its heart. Agatha's eyes sparkled with delight. Each detail, each contradictory statement, each small discovery was a stepping stone to unraveling the mystery. And she, as always, was ready to follow the trail wherever it might lead.
The tip had come from the smallest and most timid observer of all, a nervous child with wide eyes and an uncertain voice. "There's, a shed," he whispered, shuffling his feet. "It's behind the pumpkins. I think something's in there." Agatha had smiled at him, patting his shoulder in encouragement before tucking the observation neatly into her mental notebook. Now, following a narrow path barely visible between the rows of autumn-tinted pumpkins, she approached a small, weathered structure, partially hidden by tall stalks of corn and tendrils of climbing vines. The wooden boards were faded and warped, and the rusty latch creaked ominously as she pushed the door open. Inside, the air smelled of old hay and a faint tang of earth, a mixture simultaneously comforting and oddly mysterious. Sunlight streamed through gaps in the boards, highlighting motes of dust that danced lazily in the warm afternoon glow. Agatha stepped carefully over a tangle of stray straw, her eyes immediately drawn to a small ledger lying atop a rickety workbench. Its leather cover was cracked with age, but the pages inside were meticulously organized, filled with neat rows of names and items. She flipped it open and read the entries. Several pumpkins listed as missing,
alongside other festival supplies noted with quiet precision. A flicker of recognition passed through her mind. Someone she knew well enough in the village might be behind this, though she kept the thought to herself, letting it linger like a silent riddle. Her attention shifted to a small, rectangular label lying nearby, torn at the edges and half covered by hay. The handwriting was familiar, the precise looping script of someone used to commanding attention. Agatha tucked this detail into her memory, noting the potential significance without revealing her suspicion just yet. On a nearby hook hung a hat, oddly pristine compared to the otherwise dusty interior. Its smooth surface gleamed faintly in the sunlight, untouched by the hay or the dirt tracks leading to the shed. Something about it felt deliberate, almost staged, as if someone had left it there to be noticed, or to mislead. Agatha studied it thoughtfully, her mind already assembling a web of possibilities. Who had placed it there, why, and what did it signify in the wider pattern she was beginning to perceive? Outside, the faint murmur of villagers drifted through the thin walls of the shed. They speculated on everything from the farmhand's fall to missing pumpkins, entirely unaware that their own stories, half-truths and small deceptions, might be entwined with a more serious matter. Agatha paused, letting the noise wash over her, realizing how effortlessly secrets could hide beneath ordinary chatter, just as she herself had hidden in the shadows to watch, listen, and gather the pieces of the puzzle. She crouched to examine the floor more closely, noting faint footprints pressed into the soft earth beneath the hay. The patterns were uneven, some prints smudged, others crisp, suggesting hurried movement. Agatha's eyes narrowed in concentration as she traced them mentally back to the barn and then toward the main festival area. Someone had been here, and they had left a trail. Subtle, perhaps, but unmistakable to the observant eye. Rising carefully, she ran a finger along the ledger's edge, savoring the tactile satisfaction of discovery. Each object, the ledger, the missing label, the clean hat, the footprints, were a fragment of a story waiting to be told. Agatha smiled faintly, relishing the thrill of piecing it together while keeping her knowledge private. Outside, the festival continued, the villagers' chatter and laughter serving as a cozy backdrop to her careful observation. Here, in the quiet, sun-dappled shed, the threads of mystery were beginning to weave themselves together, promising secrets yet to be revealed. Chapter 4. Villagers Under Scrutiny. Agatha retreated to the edge of the festival, where a quiet bench beneath a gnarled oak offered a vantage point over the villagers milling about the pumpkin patch. She perched gracefully, adjusting her scarf, and began sorting through the mental catalog of observations she had accumulated so far. Every twitch of an eyebrow, every nervous laugh, and every glance too quick to be casual was filed meticulously. Her mind danced over conflicting statements, aligning them like pieces of a puzzle only she could see. The vicar's niece, Miss Penelope Harcourt, had been hovering near the cider stall for the better part of an hour, her notebook clutched tightly as she jotted down every snippet of gossip she overheard. Her laughter was delicate but sharp, a bit too polished, as though she were playing a role rather than reacting naturally. Agatha noted it with a quiet smile. Curious. She seems more interested in the story than the cider, she thought, already considering how that might connect to the strange happenings of the day. Nearby, the village baker bustled around the stalls, his apron dusted with flour in a way that seemed slightly performative. He offered unsolicited help to almost everyone who passed, smiling broadly and insisting that he could carry this or hold that. Agatha arched an eyebrow. Benevolence, she decided, could be genuine, or it could be a distraction. The mind, she reflected, often hid as much in gestures as in words. Her gaze flicked to the farm owner, Mr. Ashford, who leaned against the gate-post, avoiding eye contact with the gathering crowd. His hands were clasped tightly behind his back, knuckles white, and he shifted from foot to foot in a manner that betrayed unease. Agatha's lips twitched into a faint grin. Ah, the guilty always find creative ways to appear innocent, she mused, silently applauding her own deduction. She jotted a mental note to observe him more closely, especially whenever attention wandered elsewhere. As she walked between the clusters of villagers, Agatha asked casual, seemingly innocent questions. "Did anyone notice if the gate was properly latched this morning?" she inquired to Mrs. Tibbins, who nearly spilled her basket of apples in surprise. "Well, I suppose it might have been loose," she stammered, and Agatha's sharp eyes caught a flicker of hesitation that suggested there was more to the story. A small group of children ran past, one tripping over an uneven cobblestone and sending a basket of tiny pumpkins tumbling into the path. Agatha bent to help, handing the pumpkins back with exaggerated care. "It's all right, little ones," she said cheerfully, while mentally noting that minor accidents could provide excellent cover for someone attempting to move unnoticed. Humor, she thought, was often the best lens through which to watch human behavior. It encouraged slips of truth and moments of honesty hidden behind polite smiles. By mid-afternoon, Agatha had begun piecing together subtle patterns. A nervous glance here, an overly eager offer there, and tiny contradictions in stories revealed an undercurrent of tension weaving through the festival. Each villager, no matter how mundane they seemed, contributed a brushstroke to the portrait she was forming in her mind. Some were innocent but anxious, some anxious but guilty, and some so skillfully deceptive that only a keen observer could begin to untangle their intentions. Perching once more on the bench, she allowed herself a moment of satisfaction. The festival's vibrant colors, the rustle of leaves, and the murmurs of gossip formed a perfect backdrop for her quiet amusement. Her mind hummed with possibilities, teasing out motives and examining behaviors with the delight of one assembling a delicate jigsaw. Agatha smiled to herself, confident that each small revelation brought her closer to uncovering the truth beneath the village's cheerful veneer. Night had fallen over Carsley, draping the village in a soft, silvery glow. The air was crisp, carrying the faint scent of fallen leaves and the lingering aroma of cider from the day's festival. Agatha pulled her cardigan tightly around her shoulders, a scarf snugly wound, and tiptoed down the path toward the pumpkin patch. Her curiosity refused to let her rest. Something about the day's events had unsettled her, a thread of unease she could not ignore. From the edge of the field she spotted a shadowy figure moving cautiously between the pumpkins. The figure paused now and then, as if listening for intruders, before stepping further into the moonlight. Agatha ducked behind a hay bale, her boots crunching softly against the dry leaves. Stealthy, yes, but not silent enough, she mused, with a faint grin, imagining the expression on her own face should someone catch her skulking about. Keeping low, she crept closer, her eyes narrowing to catch every subtle movement. The figure halted near the unclaimed pumpkin, pulling out a small envelope and speaking in a low, urgent tone to someone unseen. Agatha strained to hear, catching fragments of conversation. Cannot afford the past to be exposed. The ledger, if it surfaces. Promise it stays quiet. Each phrase sent a ripple of shock and curiosity through her. Blackmail, old grudges, secrets that could explain the chaos of the day. Her heart beat a little faster, not from fear, but from exhilaration. The quiet of the night amplified each sound, the rustle of leaves, the distant hoot of an owl, the low murmur of voices. The shadowy figure glanced around, then hurried away toward the barn, dropping something in the process. Agatha's sharp eyes caught a small piece of paper fluttering to the ground, half hidden beneath a stray pumpkin vine. She retrieved it carefully, unfolding it to reveal a torn piece of a letter. The handwriting was urgent, almost frantic, and the words hinted at secrets someone desperately wished to keep hidden. Agatha tucked the fragment into her pocket, the thrill of discovery making her pulse quicken. Even in the quiet of night, the pumpkin patch seemed alive with whispers, shadows, and hints of mischief. She allowed herself a brief,
mischievous smile. "Well, someone's certainly making a mess of what should have been a charming village festival," she thought, shaking her head in gentle amusement. As she crept back along the path toward her cottage, Agatha's mind replayed the events of the day, weaving together clues, behaviors, and overheard fragments into a tapestry of possibilities. Each observation, the nervous villagers, the missing key, the torn fabric, and now the letter, fitted into a larger picture she was beginning to glimpse, tantalizing and incomplete. Returning to the warmth of her home, Agatha set the letter fragment on her desk, the flickering candlelight casting long shadows across its edges. She sat back with a quiet sigh, feeling the weight of responsibility settle upon her. The village slept, blissfully unaware of the threads of deception and danger that lurked beneath its cozy exterior. And Agatha, with curiosity sharpened and resolve steady, knew that the puzzle was far from solved, and that she was the one destined to untangle it.
Chapter 5. The investigation deepens. The morning sun streamed through the windows of Agatha's cottage, highlighting the scattered notes, sketches, and scraps of paper that she had amassed over the past 2 days. Today, she decided, would be dedicated to interviewing the villagers more formally, piecing together the tangled web of motives and minor deceptions that surrounded the festival. Her teacup, still warm with a lingering hint of cinnamon, sat at her elbow as she considered the first subject, Mrs. Tibbins, whose nervous energy had already drawn her attention. Mrs. Tibbins arrived promptly, her hands trembling slightly as she clutched a basket of apples. "Oh, Agatha, I didn't do anything wrong, you understand," she stammered, seating herself with a cautious glance at the ledger fragment on the table. Agatha offered a disarming smile. "Of course, my dear. Just curious about the day's events. Let's start with the pumpkins, shall we?" She probed gently, observing every twitch, every hesitation. It became apparent quickly. Jealousy over the pumpkin growing contest lingered in Mrs. Tibbins' mind, though she tried to mask it with chatter about pies and the crispness of the morning air. Next came Mr. Coma, the village accountant, who arrived sporting an unusually bright waistcoat, clearly hoping to impress. His statements were precise, but overly rehearsed, and Agatha noticed his bowler hat tipped at a slightly suspicious angle. "And you were near the barn this morning?" she asked casually, watching his reaction. A tiny flicker of unease passed across his face, subtle, but enough for Agatha to make a mental note. Patterns, she reminded herself, often hid in the smallest details. As the morning progressed, she encountered villagers whose motives intertwined with long-standing rivalries. Mrs. Pendleton, still meticulously fussing over her apron, admitted, with a hint of pride, that she had competed in last year's festival without acknowledging a minor sabotage by a fellow competitor. The vicar's niece, Miss Harcourt, was more eager than usual, scribbling in her notebook while offering observations that were both innocent and oddly pointed. Each conversation layered additional possibilities atop the puzzle she was assembling, though not without a few red herrings. Agatha's mind worked playfully, connecting scraps of information into a tentative web. There was a disputed plot of land on the edge of the pumpkin patch, a subtle rivalry over the most aesthetically perfect pumpkin, and small incidents of mischief, spilled cider, broken fence slats, and missing tools that could be interpreted in multiple ways. Each villager, in turn, revealed glimpses of pride, fear, or resentment, and Agatha cataloged it all with precision. She leaned back in her chair for a moment, swirling the tea in her cup, smiling to herself. It was a delightful dance, testing alibis, observing reactions, and gently teasing the truth from polite but guarded mouths. Even small social faux pas, the accidental bump, the stammered reply, the misplaced phrase, offered insights into the hearts and minds of the villagers. By noon, Agatha had a clearer picture emerging. Hidden motives were no longer abstract. They took shape in whispered resentments, subtle envy, and long-forgotten grievances. And yet, amid the swirl of possibilities and red herrings, she felt a satisfying thrill. The investigation was deepening, patterns were forming, and the cozy village of Carsley was gradually revealing the secrets it had tucked beneath autumn leaves.
The pumpkin carving contest had drawn a cheerful crowd, yet beneath the colorful banners and playful chatter, a subtle tension hummed through the air. Agatha found herself near the judging table, notebook in hand, observing the contestants with a mixture of amusement and keen attention. The aroma of autumn spices mingled with the earthy scent of the pumpkins, creating a cozy backdrop that contrasted sharply with the undercurrent of suspicion she detected in the participants. Contestants leaned over their pumpkins, knives flashing in precise motions, while neighbors and friends offered advice or whispered critiques. Agatha's eyes darted from one person to another, noting the small gestures and furtive glances. Mrs. Tibbins, for example, bit her lip repeatedly, glancing toward the unclaimed polished pumpkin, as if comparing her efforts to an invisible standard. Mr. Coma's posture was unusually stiff, and he avoided looking at certain neighbors who had been particularly vocal about past festival mishaps. Each movement, smile, or frown was a thread for Agatha to follow. The children giggled as they carved tiny faces, some exaggeratedly cheerful, others slightly sinister. Agatha allowed herself a quiet chuckle at their enthusiasm, while mentally noting how even innocent behavior could reveal hidden tendencies in adults nearby. A subtle elbow nudge here, a shared glance there, small provocations, almost imperceptible, hinted at old grudges or rivalry. Agatha filed each observation meticulously, her mind weaving connections between these subtle gestures and the events she had witnessed over the past 2 days. As she moved along the line of contestants, her gaze fell on the polished pumpkin she had noticed earlier. Someone had placed it carefully on a central table, as if to draw attention, and it gleamed under the afternoon sun. Agatha crouched slightly, noting a faint smudge near the base, almost invisible unless closely inspected. Curious, she thought. Deliberate, or just a byproduct of handling? Either way, it was an anomaly she would not ignore. Nearby, a hushed argument broke out between 2 villagers over a minor carving technique, voices low enough to escape the notice of the larger crowd. Agatha observed the tension, recognizing how even playful competition could stir hidden feelings, jealousy, pride, or guilt. Every interaction was a potential clue, and she allowed herself a small, indulgent smile at the way human nature revealed itself in the most ordinary of circumstances. The judges moved from pumpkin to pumpkin, nodding and commenting politely, yet Agatha noticed a brief pause near the polished pumpkin. Their expression flickered slightly, almost imperceptibly, as if recognizing something unusual. She made a mental note. A key detail, she suspected, was about to reveal itself in this very contest, hiding in plain sight amid laughter and applause. By the time the contest reached its climax, the festive atmosphere had reached a delicate balance. Pumpkins gleaming, children chattering, and villagers mingling, all underpinned by the subtle tension of secrets and suspicion. Agatha's eyes twinkled with anticipation. She knew that the next revelation, whether a misplaced carving tool, a revealing glance, or an unnoticed smudge, could change everything. Until then, she watched, amused and alert, savoring the intricate dance of human behavior playing out in the golden light of autumn. As the sun dipped lower, casting long shadows across the pumpkin patch, Agatha returned to the heart of the festival with a sense of purpose. The villagers, still lingering among the stalls and pumpkins, offered her smiles and casual greetings, unaware that she was about to probe deeper into their carefully maintained facades. She approached Mr. Ashford first, the farm owner, whose uneasy demeanor had caught her attention since the first day. "Mr. Ashford," she began lightly, "how's the day treated you? Busy with all the excitement, I expect?" Her tone was conversational, casual, yet edged with subtle scrutiny.
He shifted, avoiding eye contact, as he gestured toward the scattered pumpkins. "Oh, yes, yes, busy, very busy indeed," he replied, a hint of defensiveness creeping into his voice. Agatha's eyes flicked to his hands, noting how tightly he clenched and unclenched them. She allowed a brief pause, letting the quiet hum of the festival fill the space. Then she asked, "And the barn gate, was it secured all morning?" His hesitation, almost imperceptible, spoke volumes. I believe so," he said, his voice faltering. Agatha smiled faintly. "Ah, the first crack," she thought. Small inconsistencies, even slight hesitations, often revealed more than outright confessions. Next, she turned to Mrs. Pendleton, whose apron had been meticulously adjusted 3 times since the morning. "Did you notice anything unusual near the shed?" she asked, tilting her head with an air of polite curiosity. Mrs. Pendleton's eyes darted toward the children playing nearby, and her hand brushed nervously over a stray lock of hair. "Well, I might have seen something, but it was nothing of consequence," she murmured. Agatha made a note of the subtle avoidance and the carefully vague phrasing. Finally, she approached Miss Penelope Harcourt, the vicar's niece who had been hovering near the cider stall and notebook in hand. "You were quite diligent with your observations today," Agatha remarked. "Any details stand out?" Miss Harcourt faltered, then added a comment about the misplaced pumpkin, inadvertently revealing a timing discrepancy she had overlooked earlier. Agatha's eyes sparkled. "Interesting. The pieces continue to fall into place," she mused, silently savoring the quiet thrill of discovery. The critical moment came when Mr. Coma, the overly helpful accountant, offered an alibi with a misplaced emphasis on minor details. Agatha's playful, gentle questioning drew out a slip of the tongue, a mention of the barn near the exact time a footprint was left, contradicting his earlier statement. His eyes widened, and he stammered, attempting to recover, but the subtle confession had been made. Agatha's mind raced, connecting the dots, the ledger, the footprints, the torn fabric, and now this critical inconsistency. She allowed a small, satisfied smile to play across her lips, careful to maintain her charm while keeping the suspense alive. The festival's colorful banners fluttered above, the golden light painting a warm glow across the villagers' faces, yet beneath the coziness, the threads of truth were unraveling steadily. Agatha's playful, patient probing had uncovered a key revelation, one that would set the stage for the final twist without shattering the village's cheerful veneer. As she stepped back, allowing the villagers to regroup, Agatha's eyes lingered on the unclaimed, polished pumpkin. Quietly, she acknowledged the subtle thrill of anticipation. The final pieces were nearly in place, and the cozy mystery of the pumpkin patch was poised for its ultimate resolution. Chapter 7. The Mystery Unfolds. Agatha called the villagers together near the central pumpkin display, her voice carrying just enough authority to command attention without disturbing the festive charm of the afternoon. The golden light of late afternoon cast long, cozy shadows across the field, and the crisp autumn air carried the faint scent of cider and freshly carved pumpkins. Children paused their games, adults straightened nervously, and all eyes turned toward her. She smiled, adjusting her scarf and tapping her notebook lightly. "Ladies and gentlemen," she began, her tone polite but deliberate. "The events of the past 2 days have been unsettling, I know, but I believe it is time to untangle the threads of what has occurred." A hush fell over the group, punctuated only by the occasional rustle of leaves underfoot. Agatha's eyes swept across the villagers, noting each expression: curiosity, anxiety, and a few masked smirks that suggested guilty knowledge. She gestured to the polished, unclaimed pumpkin at the center. "This pumpkin," she said, "has been at the heart of our mystery, but it is not the pumpkin itself that is culpable. Rather, it is the actions of one individual driven by envy, past grievances, and a desire to manipulate the festival's events for personal gain." Murmurs spread through the crowd, some incredulous, some intrigued.
Agatha began to outline the chain of evidence carefully. Footprints led from the barn to the pumpkin display, inconsistent with the stated movements of certain villagers. A ledger of missing items indicates premeditation, while a torn letter fragment reveals blackmail and secrets meant to be concealed. Small but deliberate clues, a clean hat, a scrap of embroidered fabric, further point toward one person's involvement. She paused, letting the significance sink in, her eyes twinkling with anticipation. Then, with a small flourish, she turned toward Mr. Coma, the village accountant whose overly helpful demeanor had seemed almost too perfect. Mr. Coma, it was your misaligned statements coupled with your inadvertent admission regarding the barn that provided the final piece of the puzzle. The crowd collectively gasped. Mr. Coma's bowler hat slipped slightly as he blinked in astonishment. I don't understand, he stammered, his usually precise composure unraveling. Agatha continued gently, weaving the narrative with clarity and wit. You acted out of jealousy over the pumpkin contest, compounded by lingering resentment from past disagreements with other villagers. The ledger, the footprints, and even the small tidy hat all were elements of your design to mislead and distract. Mr. Coma's eyes flickered toward the unclaimed pumpkin, and a sheepish blush crept across his cheeks. Villagers reacted in a mixture of relief and amusement. Mrs. Tibbins laughed nervously, shaking her head, while Miss Penelope Harcourt scribbled notes furiously, eyes wide. Even the vicar's niece couldn't resist a wry smile at the unraveling of her neighbor's pretensions. Agatha allowed herself a small, satisfied grin. The tension had dissipated, replaced by the gentle, cozy warmth of a village restored to equilibrium. Let this be a lesson, she concluded, voice soft but firm, that envy and secrecy often create more trouble than they are worth, and that even in the midst of a charming festival, careful observation and a thoughtful mind can illuminate the truth. She straightened, eyes scanning the assembled villagers, sensing their appreciation and quiet amusement. The mystery had been resolved, yet the village's charm and camaraderie remained intact, preserving the cozy atmosphere even in the wake of revelation. As evening settled over Carsley, the golden glow of the autumn sun softened into a gentle amber, painting the village in warm, cozy hues. Agatha sat at her kitchen table, a steaming cup of tea cradled between her hands, and let herself exhale fully for the first time in days. The events of the festival, the mystery, the revelations, the tension, now seemed almost dreamlike against the quiet rhythm of the cottage. Outside, leaves rustled in a mild breeze, carrying faint whispers of laughter from the villagers who'd resumed their evening strolls. Her close friends, including Mrs. Tibbins and Miss Penelope Harcourt, had gathered for a quiet reflection over tea and biscuits. Agatha shared her observations, carefully threading her words with humor and gentle amusement. "You see," she said, lifting her cup with a playful flourish, "even in the midst of polished pumpkins and misplaced hats, people reveal their true selves in the smallest gestures." Mrs. Tibbins laughed softly, nearly spilling her tea, while Miss Harcourt scribbled notes with a grin, clearly fascinated by Agatha's blend of insight and wit. Outside, the festival resumed in a subdued, cheerful manner. Villagers reconciled over minor misunderstandings, laughter echoing between the rows of pumpkins. The children returned to their games, squealing in delight as they chased one another across the field. Even Mr. Ashford appeared relieved, tending to the patch with renewed care, while Mr. Coma, now sheepishly contrite, assisted others in repairing minor damages from the festival's earlier chaos. Agatha observed it all with quiet satisfaction, pleased that the village had recovered its cozy charm. She sipped her tea, letting the warmth settle in her chest, and allowed herself a moment of reflection. Each clue, each careful observation had contributed to restoring peace, and yet she sensed the delicate balance of human behavior, how envy, pride, and secrecy could still ripple quietly beneath the surface. The puzzle had been solved, but life in Carsley would inevitably continue to produce new threads of intrigue. Her lips curled in a small, knowing smile. "Of course," she murmured, more to herself than to anyone else, "one mystery solved only makes room for the next." Outside, the first hints of twilight shimmered in the horizon, and the shadows of the pumpkin patch seemed to beckon, teasing with possibilities yet to be explored. Even in the quiet there was promise, new questions, new clues, and the unmistakable thrill of discovery waiting just around the corner. As her friends chatted quietly, Agatha allowed herself to bask in the comforting rhythm of tea, laughter, and autumn evening scents. Cinnamon, crisp leaves, and the faint aroma of pumpkin pies cooling on window sills. The cozy village felt alive, yet safe, its small mysteries now settled, its warmth restored. Yet beneath it all, the subtle pull of curiosity lingered, a gentle reminder that in Carsley, adventure, and perhaps another pumpkin-related puzzle, was never far away.
Chapter 8. Home Again, Cozy and Content. Agatha pushed open the door to her cottage, the familiar creak of the hinges greeting her like an old friend. The aroma of burning logs mingled with the faint lingering scent of chamomile from her kitchen shelf, wrapping the space in warmth and comfort. She kicked off her boots, leaving traces of damp leaves on the mat, and exhaled a long, satisfied sigh. The events of the festival, the mystery unraveled, and the small chaos of the past days now felt pleasantly distant in the cozy refuge of her home. She placed the polished pumpkin carefully on a low shelf in the corner, its gleaming surface reflecting the soft glow of the lamps. Nearby, the scraps of the torn letter, the ledger, and even the embroidered fabric were laid out neatly on the table, a small tableau of evidence and memory. Agatha couldn't resist a wry smile as she surveyed the collection. The story of the festival, the minor deceptions, and the ultimate revelations were all captured here, tangible yet whimsical. Settling into her favorite armchair by the fire, she allowed herself a moment to reflect on the villagers' quirks. Mrs. Tibbins' nervous energy, Miss Penelope Harcourt's incessant note-taking, and even Mr. Coma's sheepish grin played across her mind like a montage. Agatha chuckled softly, imagining their reactions to the final unveiling of the culprit. Each had contributed in their peculiar way to the unfolding of events, and she appreciated the humor and humanity in their foibles. Her fingers traced the edge of the torn letter fragment, pondering the tiny details she had observed, the subtle gestures, the misaligned statements, the footprints leading here and there. Each clue had its own personality, its own rhythm, almost as if the objects themselves whispered secrets only to those willing to listen. Agatha mused aloud. It's remarkable what people leave behind when they think no one is watching. She sipped her tea, the warmth spreading through her chest and matching the quiet satisfaction she felt in the aftermath of her investigations. Outside, the village was settling into evening. Leaves rustled softly in the cool breeze, and distant laughter from the lingering festival-goers drifted through the open window. Agatha listened, appreciating the ordinary sounds of village life, each one reassuring in its continuity. The events of the past days, fear, intrigue, and revelation were now woven into the fabric of Carsley's autumn, a tapestry of small adventures and enduring charm. She set down her cup and rearranged the festival mementos, aligning the ledger, letter, and hat just so. Her mind wandered playfully, speculating on which of the villagers might harbor secrets yet undiscovered. There was always another puzzle, another thread to pull in Carsley. For now, though, she allowed herself to bask in the comforting predictability of her cottage, the soft crackle of the fire, the faint scent of baked goods cooling in the kitchen, and the gentle hum of the village beyond her window.
Agatha leaned back, letting her eyes wander around the room, appreciating the familiar clutter of books, trinkets, and knickknacks she had collected over the years. She smiled to herself, recognizing the perfect balance between chaos and order, observation and intuition, curiosity and contentment. Here, in her cozy cottage, she was both detective and observer, strategist and storyteller, and she relished the quiet triumph of the day's work. Outside, the night deepened, but inside all was calm, warm, and deliciously full of promise.
As the evening deepened, Agatha moved about her cottage, dimming lamps and straightening the last of her festival mementos. The fire crackled softly in the hearth, casting flickering shadows across the walls lined with books and curiosities collected over years of quiet observation. She relished the calm, a contrast to the excitement and tension of the past days. The scent of cinnamon and baked pumpkin lingered faintly in the air, mingling with the earthy aroma of the leaves pressed against the doorstep outside. Just as she prepared to hang her coat and settle for the night, a glint of something unusual caught her eye. At her doorstep rested a small, neatly wrapped package, tied with twine and adorned with a single dried leaf. There was no note, no indication of who had left it, only the quiet suggestion of a secret waiting to be discovered. Agatha raised an eyebrow, a mischievous smile tugging at her lips. "Well, well," she murmured, "it seems Carsley has one last trick for me tonight." She stepped closer, taking in the details, the faint aroma of herbs, the texture of the paper, the careful folds and careful placement, as though the sender wanted her to notice without being seen. Agatha crouched, inspecting the package with the precision of someone accustomed to piecing together clues. Curious, delicate, and just enough to spark imagination, she thought. The suspense was gentle, almost playful, and it made her pulse quicken, not with fear, but with delight. For a moment, she allowed herself to imagine the possibilities. Could it be a gift from a grateful villager? A cryptic puzzle left for her amusement, or perhaps a prelude to a mystery she had yet to uncover? Each scenario was vivid and tantalizing, and she considered it carefully, noting the careful presentation and subtle hints embedded in the wrapping. Agatha's mind raced through potential explanations, cataloging them with a mixture of humor and excitement. Finally, she set the package on her small kitchen table, surrounding it with the warm glow of candlelight. Its quiet presence seemed to promise adventure without urgency, teasing her curiosity in the softest, most inviting way. Agatha smiled, pouring herself a small cup of chamomile tea and sitting nearby, allowing the night to settle around her. The sounds of the village, the gentle rustling of leaves, the distant laughter of children still lingering after the festival, the occasional bark of a dog, wove a comforting soundtrack to the moment. As she sipped her tea, Agatha's thoughts drifted, playful and contemplative. She knew the day's mystery had been solved, yet here, at the edge of the night, a new question had appeared. Who had left the package? Why now? And what stories, secrets, or surprises might it contain? The gentle thrill of anticipation blended seamlessly with the cozy warmth of her cottage, leaving her heart light and her curiosity piqued. Finally, with the package still teasingly unexplored beside her, Agatha prepared for bed, slipping under the soft blankets and closing her eyes. Outside, the village slept, bathed in the soft silver glow of the autumn moon. And inside, the promise of a new adventure lingered, a whisper of mystery that would wait patiently for her keen mind to awaken to it. In Carsley, even the quietest night carried the potential for intrigue, and Agatha smiled as she drifted toward sleep.